Hi, I'm Leanne Ely. I'm a nutritionist, a New York Times best-selling author, and some people even say I'm a life coach. I started the Daily Dish Show to share my story, my truth, and my journey to vibrancy, and to inspire others to do the same. Because it's all about grit, perseverance, and finding a way despite the odds. It's about embracing the whole woman, not just the parts that are easy to love, and feeding her heart, mind, body, and soul. But I found that this isn't just my story, it's your story too. It's go time. This is the Daily Dish. Let's get busy and get on to what we're talking about today, because we are doing contrasts all this week. Stark contrasts, because our brains like that. Our brains like to say, oh, this, not that, or that, not this. Now I get it. So I got this idea from a Men's Health magazine. I explained this yesterday, but Men's Health used to do this. I don't even know if they still do this, but eat this, not that. And it was always so stark. They'd show like an apple versus an apple gooey fruit roll up, and I used to do it food or crap. If anybody ever saw my presentation on that, it was just, obvious, right? Obvious. This is what this is about. But have you ever heard of this term called generativity? I'm going to bet you don't. You've never heard of it. Anybody? Generativity? I mean, if Allison were here, she'd say, yes, I've heard of that, because she's a psychologist. But generativity is the ability to love beyond your own backyard. It's the ability to love people other than that are, not just necessarily in your inner circle, that aren't just necessarily friends and close associates and family. It's having concern for future generations and also making the world a better place to live in. I mean, that sounds pretty generous and kind-hearted, doesn't it? So I always think about this. You remember the old Coke commercial? I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. That's what I think of when I think of this term, generativity. It's an idealistic scene where everybody's getting along, perfect harmony, things like that, smiling, singing, kumbaya. Pretty cool, right? But studies have found that people who possess generativity lived way happier lives than those who did not. Now that perked up my ears. I'm thinking, well, what's the deal? I mean, most people I think are really in that place of thinking better for others and having just more of an empathetic worldview. Most of us are, unless they're completely narcissistic and wrapped up in your own stuff and think the whole world revolves around you and your little world. Most of us aren't like that, though we've recognized, I think, one thing the pandemic has taught us is that it's a great big world out there and we are all affected, aren't we? We're all affected. But the psychologists found that those possessed this generativity trait were very much happier than those who did not. This is why. It's something simple. Yeah, something that shockingly simple, like having concern for others and helping to make sure that they live better lives. But there's a big reason why this is so effective. And that's, get this. So there's this author named Dan McAdams. He wrote this book called The Redemptive Self. He studied people who seemingly had this generativity trait. They considered it a trait when they were studying this, and found one big difference between them and between others, and that was the story they told themselves about themselves, right? Okay, about themselves and about their lives. So this was, and remember, this is a study that they did. This is an actual study that was funded, by some company or something. So I just want you to realize something. This isn't just something this guy noticed and whatever. This is from a study. And what they did is they took this giant swath of people, and it was men and women of all ages, all colors, all cultures, all, however they identified gender-wise, kind of a thing, however they sexually, how they identify, all of that stuff. So there was it was a great big huge tumbler of humanity, all kinds of folks, professions, everything, just everything different. But they all possess this whole thing of generativity. So get this, they all had way different stories to tell, of course. I always think about this when I'm out in a crowd, by the way, it's a sidebar. When I'm in a crowd, I always look around and I see all these people and I always think, everyone here has a unique story. And I bet if we all sat around and talked about it, we'd find the Kevin Bacons in it, how you're 7 degrees separated from Kevin Bacon or whatever that is. But there's connections always. I don't believe anything is ever random, really, but there's connections always. And, people all have their stories. But there was a big difference of what the plumb line that these guys all shared, all these men and women all shared. And that was the story that they told themselves all had a similar thread, right? First, they thought life is wonderful. Life is wonderful. Then something bad happens, and they call this the contamination story, right? I mean, this is how Hollywood movies are filmed, really. Everything's great, it's idyllic, then all of a sudden the war comes, they blow up the family farm, and now we're on the run and we're refugees. Life sucks. So that's pretty much what they did, is they have, this is what the story is. First, life is wonderful. Second, the contamination story happens and something happens to them, their family, their person, whatever. But rather, here's where it gets interesting. Rather than play that out over and over and over again, trapped in the negative loop of that story and those tragic circumstances, they create a redemptive story out of it. Redemption. Does that sound familiar? Right? Tragedy to redemption. Hold on. So I look at that and I go, whoa. What we're talking about is beauty from ashes, y'all. Yeah, get out the Isaiah. Get out your Bible right there. Beauty from ashes. So let's look at the contrast, because this is where it gets interesting. Instead of having this crippling tragedy that has absolutely muffed up your whole life and is never going to help you to be this, that, or the other thing. And I mean, think about people who've had tragic things happen. Think about the young woman who, can't think of her name right now, but she was a surfer and had her arm bitten off. She lost her arm, but she didn't lose her life, and she chose to look at it differently, didn't she? She didn't say, this shark ruined my life, I hate sharks, now I'm going to go find every shark that I could kill, or I'm going to go on this circuit and start talking about the dangers of sharks and warn everybody about sharks. No, she went back out into the water. As soon as they gave her Bethany, that's right. As soon as they gave her the okay, they let her go. They let her go back out, and she was out paddling with one arm. She got married with one arm. She had a kid, one arm. It didn't define her. It was merely something that happened, and out of that, she found a lesson, and she actually is on the speaking tour circuit, and she is talking about the lesson that you learned from tragedies and how they reshape and can reconfigure the entire way that you do life. Contrast, big time contrast. They look for redemption instead of rolling around in the same old pain and regurgitating the same old story over and over again. Because come on. If a shark came up and, if I'm on a board and all of a sudden here comes a shark and there goes my arm, man, I don't know that I would be as gracious as that. But I'm hoping that I would be. And God, I would like to keep my arms, please. Because I still want to go out in the ocean. But, there's value in the pain. There's value in the pain if you choose to look for it. There's value in the pain if you choose to extrapolate a lesson. They could say that they were just dealt a bad hand. They could instead see themselves, but instead they see themselves as resilient, better than resilient, way more than resilient. They see themselves as better, stronger because of it. Drop the mic. I mean, think about that. Think about that. This tragedy became their reason for being, after all. after all of this. They didn't become bitter. They didn't become, nasty and over it. They didn't shut down. They opened up. It was a growth lesson for them. So that's what I wrote here. Instead of being trapped in trauma, they have a post-trauma growth spurt. They had a growth spurt. They learned from it. They became better human beings because of it. That's a contrast right there. That is a huge contrast. And they tested this generativity with a group of heart attack patients. This was interesting. And those who construed some sort of benefit from the heart attack were the ones that had significantly better outcomes than those that didn't, and they were less likely to have a subsequent heart attack. We hear about this stuff, but what I'm trying to do is show you that there is a category of people who are like this. They're not unusual. They've made a different decision is all. They're choosing to look at something through a completely different lens. That's my point. And we all have the ability to do this. This is something that can be developed. This can be a beautiful thing that comes out of our past if we choose. If we choose. So we can suffer and grow at the same time. I think that's very interesting because usually we think of suffering as just shriveling up and just, starting to die out. But no, suffering and growing. Growing through the suffering is what it's all about. And the search for meaning is how people survive the unthinkable. Think about all the Nazi concentration camps and think about, Viktor Frankl's book, The Search for Meaning, was written because of Nazi concentration camps, right? So think about that. Think about all of this stuff and think about becoming better on the other side. Look for the lessons, ask for the lessons that are in there and see if it doesn't get revealed to you, because I believe that this is how God shows himself to be who he is, and it shows us how we have the capacity because he created us. So here are some common denominators that you can find in people who have this trait. Okay, number one is they all believe that they are blessed. Do you believe you're blessed? Gosh, I know I'm blessed. I know I'm blessed abundantly, overflowingly, amazingly. But they also work from this place of gratitude. Gratitude is on their lips every single day. This is one of the reasons we start our day off in the Take Back Your Life journal with 3 gratitudes. Because if we can start with gratitude, we're going to see increasingly how blessed we are. And we're going to feel like we're here on purpose and for purpose, and that our whole purpose then is to create a new focus and to appreciate all the blessings that have been bestowed upon us. Doesn't that sound preacher-like? It's incredible. But we have all been so blessed. But those with this gosh, now I can't even say it. They are the ones who see this, feel this, live it daily, and wake up with these words on their lips. I am blessed. Number 2 is recognizing the suffering of others. When we recognize the suffering of others, we see other people and we can feel their stuff. And when you see yourself here, on purpose and for purpose here, and that you recognize that every other person on this planet is also here on purpose and for purpose, that expands the borders of our hearts. That changes everything. Think about that. Because what happens, and we see this all the time, it's very unfortunate. We see there's a whole group of folks who think that in order to be blessed, in order to be loved, in order to be whatever, you need to look like me, sound like me, be from the same place that I'm from, and be just like me, but just, maybe brown hair instead, brown eyes instead. And that's not so, because we recognize, those of us who are in this place of recognizing our one, our blessedness, and two, our chosenness. Understand that we're here on purpose and for purpose, and so is every other person on this planet. You're not the only one, sister. It's you, me, and millions of others. You don't think that they're here on purpose too and for purpose too? That's how we expand the borders of our hearts. That's how we love more. That's how we become way more empathetic and start seeing the world a little bit bigger than what our tiny little microcosm is. And number three is moral fortitude. We all believe this, right? That we have a strong moral fiber. I sure like to think so. But that comes out in what you do as well. And that you believe doing the right thing is always the right thing to do, not just when people are looking, but when people aren't looking and celebrating you anyway. And that's a big deal, because integrity, integrity certainly, it lives amongst us at all times, 100% of the time. Sometimes it's seen and sometimes it's not. But I will tell you, integrity always finds out fake integrity, doesn't it? The smoke and mirrors of pretend always finds it out. Living truthfully is moral fortitude. Living truthfully and believing in doing the right thing is also the thing that's going to be the plumb line of these folks with this incredibly generous spirit. And number four is looking at a big setback, even if it still bothers you, and doing a director's cut version. I love this. Isn't this so great? You can do a movie of your life in your head, but you can also choose what parts you're going to, dwell on. I remember a long time ago, and I don't remember the name of the movie. I don't remember, what it was, but it was a movie about, it was a true story about this thing that happened. And what they chose to do for the trauma part was they alluded to it. They didn't show it. It was a big rape scene, by the way. They didn't show this big thing, except you knew it was going to happen. And it was, imperative that you knew about this, because it was, the whole, linchpin for the story. But you don't have to get graphic and show it and have it go on for 10 minutes with the frightening music and the screaming and all of that. You don't need to do all of that, right? This is exactly what having a director's cut about your own life is about. It's choosing what scenes to amplify. It's choosing what things in your life that you want to showcase, the beauty of your life that you want to showcase. You get to do the director's cut on your own life. Isn't that just so fabulous? That doesn't mean you're denying it. That doesn't mean you're making stories up. It just means you've chosen the things that you're going to highlight, period. I love that so much. And the thing is, remember, we're not creating a false narrative here. We're creating a movie of the things that we want in our lives to shine, the things that we want to trot out in front of everybody and live in and celebrate. That's what it is. And that's when we do this, when we learn from that setback and we make a decision to do our own director's cut, what we're doing is we're walking out in faith, and we're also walking out with, this is my story, and these are the things that I'd like you to know about it. Just makes such a difference. And that leads to number five, because the balance of power and love, right? You believe, yes, you can make a difference, and yes, you can help other people along the way. But the eye-popping truth here is that as you help others, you are helping yourself. And Tanya's here, so I'm going to tell that story. So Tanya had a moment where she was wondering, should I or shouldn't I, give away all these clothes, right? This is not my first. I could say this is, Betty Sue. We could just use Betty Sue, whoever she is. But the whole thing was walking out in faith, believing in the power of love and the power of power. We can see that it's a powerful thing to love so greatly. It's a powerful thing to love with generosity. It's a powerful thing to give from a heart of abundance and a heart of having a lot. And when we do this, we are not only giving somebody something that they desperately probably need, but we're also giving back to ourselves and building up that power inside of us. There is a strength that comes from releasing things, and we see this all the time. And people who are decluttering their homes and getting them together, or decluttering their bodies and getting them together, it's the same principle. It's the same principle. There's not loss there. There's more gain than anything. There's a losing of things that no longer serve. Whether you're talking about body weight, or you're talking about knickknacks on your shelf, or whatever it is. When we do this, we move the needle in our lives, and we show not only are we full of hope and full of love for other people, but we're also showing that we believe in God, that we believe in his ever abundant giving, and we will always have enough. We don't serve a God who capitalizes in scarcity. He's like, use that up, and then I'll give you that one more thing. Maybe I'll give you another morsel. Maybe I'll give you another bucket of gruel. It's not like that. You can't outgive God. Have you noticed that? You just can't. And the more we give, and the more we give out of our abundance, and even out of what we barely have, the more we're going to get back. And that's not just in money, and it's not just in time or goods and services. It's also in our love and care for one another. This is something that's far-reaching, and that changes everything, because this is making a difference in someone's life. This is you being that one person, you being that teacher who says to the 9-year-old, when he's 40 says, if it wasn't for Mrs. Smith, I would have never fill in the blank. And Mrs. Smith is sitting there in the audience going, I don't know what I even did. I don't even remember. But you made an impact. And when we think of ourselves as being impactful people, that we can take this message and take this love and plant these seeds and love these people up, and there's always going to be more. It's never going to run out. Then we become more and more generous with our time, with our love, with our resources, with our everything. We do. It just naturally works that way. And it naturally works out too. So the future, number 6, is that the future is bright and shiny. That's another trait with these folks. That's another trait. They see this and they say, you know what? The future is bright and shiny. And do you know what that is? You know why that is? It's because wise women choose and decide to have goals that push them a little bit, that stretch them a little bit, and that give them a future and a hope. Ever hear of that one before? A future on the hope. Something to work on and toward. That's what makes life yummy and juicy and delicious, isn't it? It does. Because at that point, life is full of all kinds of different choices. And at that point, life is full of all kinds of different people. And at that point, life has become everything that you want it to become. You've elevated and risen above the circumstances, and instead grown your heart and the borders of your heart. I think that's how it's supposed to be. Honestly, I do. So what are you going to do with your story is my question. What are you going to do with your story? You can amplify the beauty of the things that have happened to you. You can look at the tragedies of things that have happened and decide that's just all you can talk about and think about. And it's because of that you can't go forward. Or you can say, you know what? I learned this amazing lesson from this thing. I learned that I'm so much more resilient. I learned that I have, Juanita, grit, not quit. I learned something about myself. And when we take that on and we're that conscious of what's going on, things start to change. So do you want your story to be a tragic tale, kind of a kind of Macbeth experience, or do you want it to be a story of redemption? You get to choose. You get to choose. First thing, though, be aware. Be aware of the story that you're telling yourself and be wise. Wise women choose the director's cut. That's what I know. Anyway, I hope that was helpful for you. Don't you love these contrast things? I sure do. Tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. Peace be with you. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on TikTok for daily tips to help support your most vibrant life. And remember, you are the author of your own story. Until next time.